This is Akashvani. Good evening and welcome to this edition of Market Mantra, in which we give you a complete update on the economic, business and stock market news of the day. I am Gaurang Dhawanlal and with me is my co-anchor in Hindi, Vishal Sharma.
नमस्कार, मार्केट मंच के एक और अंक में आपका स्वागत। प्रतिदिन की तरह कार्यक्रम में हम लाएंगे आप तक आर्थिक, व्यापारिक और शेयर बाजार की नवीनतम समाचार और साथ ही उन पर चर्चा भी करेंगे। चर्चा के लिए कार्यक्रम में हमारे साथ ऑनलाइन विशेषज्ञ भी जुड़ेंगे। सबसे पहले हेडलाइंस के साथ हैं गौरा धवनलाल।
Thank you, Vishal. A quick look at the headlines. Paving the way to auction blocks for lithium, niobium and rare earth elements. Union Cabinet approves royalty rates for mining. Key domestic share indices rise over 0.5%. Sensex ends near the 66,500 mark. Nifty closes above 19,800 level. And oil prices fall around 1% to hover near $87 per barrel.
केंद्रीय मंत्रिमंडल ने लिथियम और नायोबियम खनिजों तथा दुर्लभ मृदा तत्वों के खनन के लिए रॉयल्टी की दरों को मंजूरी दी। प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में 0.5% से अधिक का उछाल। सेंसेक्स 66,500 के नजदीक हुआ बंद। निफ्टी 19,800 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंचा और कच्चे तेल की कीमतें करीब 1% की गिरावट से $87 प्रति बैरल के आसपास आई।
We begin with our first story of the day. The government has approved royalty rates for mining of 3 critical and strategic minerals, lithium, niobium and rare earth elements, REEs. This will enable the central government to auction blocks for lithium, niobium and REEs for the first time. Critical minerals such as lithium and REEs have gained significance in view of India's commitment towards energy transition and achieving net zero emission by 2070. The royalty rate would be 3% of the London Metal Exchange price for lithium, while the rate would be 3% of the average sale price for niobium. Rare earth elements royalty rate would be 1% of the average sale price of rare earth oxide. In July this year, the Parliament had passed the Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Amendment Act 2023. One of the major reforms of the Act was to introduce an exploration license for deep-seated and critical minerals. The proposed exploration license would facilitate, encourage and incentivize private sector participation in all spheres of mineral exploration for critical and deep-seated minerals. The Act delisted 6 minerals, including lithium and niobium, from the list of atomic minerals, thereby allowing grant of concessions for these minerals to the private sector through auction. We'd also like to welcome on the show the market expert and our special guest on the show today, Avinash Kaur Rakshakarji. Avinashji, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Avinashji, the story we just read, before we move on to the stocks which are linked to this sector, the exploration license, is it something that the private sector has been looking forward to? And are these some profitable areas these companies would be interested in?
Yeah, definitely. See, this is a interesting area where not only Indian companies, but even global companies are looking at investment, in these sectors. So I think it's a very positive move. Indian government has actually ensured that there will be a lot of foreign direct investments which will be coming, not only from global players, but even domestic players are quite interested, in these, segments which have been opened up now today. So that's a positive move, and you're going to see a lot of activity in most of the metal and mining companies, which I think in due course you will see a good positive kind of traction in the market, because the opportunity for growth is quite immense here, and that's possibly going to attract a lot of foreign investment also in these sectors.
Right. So this delisting, what impact would it have on the scope of related industries? You said it's going to be positive. And what would be the gestation period? That means should investors start looking positively at these related industries now, or is there a period they can wait for?
So I think, see, these investments are high gestation projects, and anywhere, the gestation projects could range between 3 to 5 years. But I think the very fact that the government has opened up this area actually ensures that the long-term, kind of business prospects for these players is ensured. I think earlier it was a restricted area. Private investment was not allowed, but now with private investment allowed, investors normally take at least a 3 to 5 year kind of time horizon to ensure that, these projects become cash positive and they, break even. The bigger benefit is that they get an opportunity, which is very massive, considering that the market opportunity for these metal and mining segments is quite huge in India, which I think is the initial promising prospect which will attract a lot of investors.
So you mean there's a process now, bidding will happen, the auction will start, and that period will take some time, but these are things to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. These are things to watch out for. And initially in the near term, you could possibly see the reaction of this news flow on specific, companies in the market. But I think for earnings to actually get reflected in numbers and to actually get reflected in performances, from investments in these projects will take some time.
Right.
जी। और मंत्रिमंडल ने युवाओं से जुड़ा एक और महत्वपूर्ण फैसला लिया है। सरकार ने एक स्वायत्त निकाय मेरा युवा भारत की स्थापना को मंजूरी दी है। इसका प्राथमिक उद्देश्य युवाओं के विकास के लिए एक सरकारी मंच तैयार करना है। नई दिल्ली में मंत्रिमंडल की बैठक के बाद सूचना और प्रसारण मंत्री अनुराग सिंह ठाकुर ने कहा कि देश में लगभग 40 करोड़ युवा हैं जो 15 से 29 वर्ष के आयु वर्ग के हैं। उन्होंने कहा कि यह युवाओं के विकास के लिए प्रौद्योगिकी सक्षम तंत्र के रूप में काम करेगा। श्री ठाकुर ने कहा कि इसका उद्देश्य युवाओं को सरकार और नागरिकों के बीच सेतु के रूप में कार्य करने में सक्षम बनाना और राष्ट्र निर्माण के लिए युवा ऊर्जा का उपयोग करना है।
So before we move on actually to the detailed talks, we have another news, cabinet related news. The Union Cabinet has approved a memorandum of understanding between India and France on cooperation in the field of digital technologies. The MOU intends to promote closer cooperation and exchange of information pertaining to digital technologies. India and France are long-standing strategic partners, and they are committed to nurturing a thriving digital ecosystem and building collaboration that empowers citizens and ensures their full participation in the digital century.
और अब बात करते हैं शेयर बाजार की। प्रमुख घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में आज 0.5% से अधिक की वृद्धि दर्ज हुई। बॉम्बे स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का सेंसेक्स 66,500 के निशान के करीब बंद हुआ। नेशनल स्टॉक एक्सचेंज का निफ्टी 19,800 के स्तर से ऊपर पहुंच गया। वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों से प्राप्त सकारात्मक संकेतों के बीच घरेलू शेयर बाजारों में ये तेजी देखी गई। सेंसेक्स 394 अंक की वृद्धि से 66,473 पर बंद हुआ और निफ्टी 122 अंक के उछाल से 19,811 पर पहुंच गया। व्यापक बाजार की बात करें तो बीएसई मिड कैप इंडेक्स 0.55% और स्मॉल कैप इंडेक्स 0.77% के लाभ के साथ बंद हुए।
Key domestic share indices today rose over 0.5%. The BSE Sensex ended near the 66,500 mark, while the NSE Nifty closed above the 19,800 level. Both stocks appreciated amid positive cues from global share markets. The Sensex gained 394 points to finish at 66,473, and the Nifty added 122 points to settle at 19,811. In the broader market at the BSE, the mid-cap index gained 0.55% and the small-cap index rose 0.77%. In the Sensex index, which is a pack of 30 companies, shares of 25 companies appreciated while 5 companies declined. Wipro climbed 3.3%, Ultratech Cement gained 2.1% and Reliance rose 1.6%. On the other hand, HCL Tech declined 1.2%, SBI fell 0.6% and TCS slipped 0.5%. In sectoral indices at the BSE, all 20 sectors logged gains. The telecommunication sector surged 1.4% and the commodities gained 1.1%. Auto sector rose 1% and FMCG added 0.9%. The overall market breadth was positive as shares of 2,320 companies gained, while those of 1,379 companies declined. A total of 123 shares remained unchanged. Avinash ji, The Nifty, well, between yesterday and today, I think the losses for day before have been made up, and if not, a little more on the positive side in terms of most shares. How do you see this movement, keeping in mind that over the past few weeks, days of fall and days of rise, they're alternating, even if it's a couple of days. So is this a pattern, or is it a response to global cues?
No, I think my guess is, markets have been very volatile ever since last week the Israel war broke out. Initially, the market, suffered a knee-jerk correction, but I think the markets then realized that, the damage for India is going to be very limited. And I think, in all probability, I think, stock-specific activity has been very vibrant, specifically on the large cap and the mid-cap stocks. So my sense is that this rise of 600 odd points in the last 2 days is definitely going to be well supported by some good delivery based buying. But I think one negative factor which is still prevalent in the market is that FIs have continued to sell. In fact, today also FI data which has come out shows a net sell-off of almost 500 odd crores. So I think that is definitely not good news. And I think in all probability, if the FIs continue to sell, then maybe around 19,900 for the Nifty, you could see a little bit of profit booking coming in. Broadly, I think the market now is going to observe the, results today. TCS also reported its data point. They announced a buyback at 41.53 level. So I think markets are now looking at earnings numbers, which will obviously get, converted into index movement in the next few weeks. So I think we'll have to take a stock-specific view, but broadly, I think the markets would consolidate from here on, and I think you'll see a lot of stock-specific activity. Like TCS numbers have been in line with market expectations, but I believe, the comment which is going to come in the conference call is going to be more important. So I think it's going to be a volatile market, but more of stock-specific activity in the coming weeks.
जी, गोरक्षकर जी, आपने कहा कि FIIs नेट सेलर अभी भी बने हुए हैं, तो हम ये मान के चलें कि DIIs का सपोर्ट मार्केट को आगे ले जा रहा है?
नहीं, बिल्कुल। देखिए, एफआईएस का सपोर्ट मार्केट में इसलिए नहीं आ रहा है क्योंकि रुपया वीक हो रहा है और डॉलर स्ट्रेंथन हो रहा है। नए डॉलर वो इसलिए नहीं डाल रहे क्योंकि अगर वो नए डॉलर डालते हैं तो करेंसी से उनको इमीडिएटली नुकसान होता है। जो पुराने इन्वेस्टमेंट्स उन्होंने इन्वेस्टमेंट इंडिया में किए हैं, वहां पे अच्छे प्रॉफिट कमाए, वो अभी थोड़ी सी वो बिकवाली कर रहे हैं। तो ये सिलसिला जब तक रहेगा तब तक मुझे लग रहा है कि ऊपरी लेवल पे हो सकता है कि थोड़ा बिकवाली का प्रेशर आपको देखने को मिले, क्योंकि एफआईएस का नेगेटिव होना अच्छी बात नहीं है। और बॉन्ड यील्ड्स यूएस में करीबन 3.5-4% पहुंचे हैं, जो काफी हाई एलिवेटेड है। तो ये भी एक रीजन है कि एफआईएस का डेटा जो है वो नेगेटिव है और उसके लिए थोड़ा सा प्रेशर इंडियन मार्केट्स में रहेगा।
जी, आज टेलीकम्युनिकेशन सेक्टर की हम बात करें तो 1.4% का उछाल आया है। ये उछाल टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में किस तरीके के बदलावों का संकेत देता है, आप से जानना चाहेंगे?
नहीं, मेरे ख्याल से देखिए, टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में काफी गवर्नमेंट के एफडीआई रिलेटेड जो अनाउंसमेंट्स है, प्लस जो अभी 5G का रोल आउट होने वाला है, ये हमको लग रहा है कि आने वाले 6 से 12 महीने में काफी बड़ा मोमेंटम और काफी एक्शन आपको कंपनीज में देखने को मिलेगा। स्पेसिफिकली अगर हम बड़े खिलाड़ी की बात करें तो रिलायंस, भारती, इन्होंने बहुत अच्छा इन्वेस्टमेंट 5G रोल आउट के लिए किया है। तो मुझे लग रहा है कि इसी कारण से मार्केट में काफी पॉजिटिविटी है, क्योंकि माना जा रहा है कि आरपू भी जो है वो काफी कंपनियां अभी वापस आरपू बढ़ाने वाली है। तो उस पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से भी मुझे लगता है कि टेलीकॉम कंपनीज के लिए प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी का जो दौर है वो आगे अगले 6-12 महीने में काफी अच्छा रहेगा, और उसी लिए शायद आपको थोड़ा बहुत ट्रैक्शन आज टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में देखने को मिला है।
Avinash, talking about stability of investment and for our retail investors, so large, mid and small cap, and there is definitely going to be more movement in the mid and small, because large caps, by virtue of their size anyway, have a more steady and a slower movement. Do you feel that in terms of if you take a 6 to 12 month period, because this is everybody's predicting it's a great time for mid and small cap to come up, but to be stable, a certain proportion of investment of people who are actually also who regularly invest every 6 months or 12 months should be in the large cap?
I think they should have a mix of large cap and mid cap. See, investors should realize that now the coming 6 months are going to be very volatile. The Israel war has started, so obviously, macros like crude and inflation are going to stay elevated for some time. What is important is now the government has announced the schedule for 5 states elections, happening in the month of November. So I think markets will definitely continue to remain volatile. So my sense is that in the next, 3 to 6 months, volatility will be very high. Next year we are going to have general elections. So typically, only if the investor has a very long-term view of 12, 18 months, then only I think he should stay invested, because they need to digest the volatility, and small cap and mid caps, as you mentioned. Whenever a sell-off happens, the sell-off happens quite aggressively, on the small and mid cap side, because liquidity here is quite limited.
Right.
So I would suggest that, investors need to take a slightly longer term call and don't expect immediate rewards, because, making quick money and fast money has now ended. I think easy money is out of the market, and I think any investor who wants to invest should at least look at investing for the next 2 years. Hopefully, once the elections are over, you will see markets regaining, traction again positively. But I think that would happen after May 24.
जी, इन्फ्लेशन को लेकर के जो वैश्विक स्तर पर जो चिंताएं बनी हुई हैं और घरेलू स्तर पर भी जो चिंताएं बनी हुई हैं, मुद्रास्फीति को लेकर के, आपको लगता है कि निकट भविष्य में बाजार पर इसका असर दिखेगा? और क्योंकि अभी भी इन्फ्लेशन को लेकर चिंताएं बनी हुई हैं।
बिल्कुल, देखिए, इन्फ्लेशन का मसला जो है वो काफी इम्पोर्टेंट है, क्योंकि यूएस में भी इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ रहा है और हमारा इन्फ्लेशन भी, अगर क्रूड की कीमतें बढ़ती है तो हमारे लिए बहुत दिक्कत हो सकती है। तो इन्फ्लेशन कम से कम अगले 3 से 4 महीने के लिए तो एलिवेटेड ही रहना चाहिए, और मार्केट शायद अभी ये रिफ्लेक्ट नहीं कर रहा है। बट सेकंड क्वार्टर के आंकड़े आएंगे, मैनेजमेंट की कमेंट्रीज आएगी, उसके बाद हमको एक ज्यादा अंदाजा आएगा कि इन्फ्लेशन का कूलिंग ऑफ कब होगा। लेकिन इन द नियर टर्म तो लग नहीं रहा है, क्योंकि क्रूड जब बढ़ेगा और ये इजराइल वॉर जब तक खत्म नहीं होता, तब तक मुझे लग रहा है कि ओवरऑल मैक्रोज जैसे क्रूड ऑयल, इन्फ्लेशन, ये एलिवेटेड ही रहेंगे।
You earlier spoke about, there will be stock specific activity. Any particular sectors of these stocks, or will it be across sectors?
No, I think we should look at, sectors which have got a large domestic market. I still believe that export-oriented companies may have some problems because of, headwinds in Europe and US. So we'll avoid IT and metals, but we'll definitely be positive on auto components, real estate, capital goods, cement. Cement companies, in fact, if you observe, today there was a very positive movement. In fact, on the banking side also, I think one can look at this sector very closely. Although, the bank index was down, I believe the numbers would be quite strong in the second quarter. So I think banking would also be a sector which I think investors should definitely look at, which should positively surprise the markets.
जी, आपने ऑटो सेक्टर की बात करी। आज 1% से अधिक के आसपास इसमें उछाल रहा है। ऑटो सेक्टर की जब हम बात करते हैं तो जो एक सकारात्मक माहौल हमें दिखाई दे रहा है, या जो एक हमें तेजी दिखाई पड़ रही है, वो हम आगे आने वाले समय में क्या पैसेंजर व्हीकल सेगमेंट में देख सकते हैं, या कमर्शियल व्हीकल सेगमेंट में हम ज्यादा तेजी की उम्मीद कर सकते हैं?
मुझे लग रहा है कि देखिए, अगर जीडीपी ग्रोथ से 6.5% होता है तो कमर्शियल व्हीकल सेक्टर के लिए मुझे लग रहा है कि और तेजी आ सकती है, क्योंकि कॉर्पोरेट कैपेक्स बढ़ रहा है, रिटेल डिमांड बढ़ रही है, और जिस प्रकार का अभी माहौल है, देखिए, गवर्नमेंट भी चाहेगी कि अगले 6 महीने में बहुत सारे इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स वो अनाउंस करे, ताकि इलेक्शन के टाइम पे ये बहुत अच्छा अचीवमेंट उनके लिए हो। तो सीमेंट कंपनीज और टिपिकली जो ऑटो कंपनीज है, इनके लिए अच्छी बात है, क्योंकि कमर्शियल व्हीकल सेल्स तब बनेगी। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि कमर्शियल व्हीकल कंपनी जैसे टाटा मोटर है, अशोक लेलैंड है, यहाँ पे डेफिनेटली इन स्टॉक्स में आपको अच्छी और परफॉर्मेंस देखने को मिल सकती है।
What would you say about two-wheelers? Because that's an area where it's a huge market in the country. Companies that are primarily focusing on two-wheelers.
No, I think two-wheeler market has also, bounced back smartly in the last 1 or 2 months, and I think we are entering the festive season, so you'll see a good ramp up in most of the companies like Hero MotoCorp, Bajaj Auto, TVS Motors. So you're right, two-wheeler sales also have got a good bounce back in the last couple of months, and hopefully, I think if rural India does well, then I think you could see a lot of these companies doing well in terms of higher volume growth.
Doing a little zoom out now, Avinash, the Israel conflict which happened when news came in and the Indian markets definitely went down. Do you think the recovery, it's been a quick recovery. As an analyst, do you think that has happened quick enough and that's a reflection of the maturity of the Indian market?
Yeah, I think my guess is that, broadly one needs to understand that the Israel war is definitely not good for India or for any country. Specifically coming to India, the only concern for India is the rise in crude oil prices. If crude oil prices don't, increase and there is a decent amount of supply in the crude oil market, then I think that is something good for us, because we have got very little, trade relations with Israel. Markets have sentimentally, got impacted on the very first day, but they realize that the earnings kind of growth of the Indian corporate sector is not going to be badly impacted by the Israel war. So I would believe that, the markets have understood this maturely, and as long as domestic money comes in, like today I was reading, SIP funds this month have crossed 16,000 crores. So, there's a lot of liquidity which is coming in the Indian markets. So obviously, fund managers have got a lot of choices to deploy this money in the Indian market. So that is also another reason why the markets were up today. So liquidity, at least from the domestic SIP investors continues to be strong.
Right.
जी, नजर डाल लेते हैं रुपए के प्रदर्शन पर। विदेशी मुद्रा बाजार में रुपया आज $1 की तुलना में 83 रुपए 19 पैसे के स्तर पर बंद हुआ। विश्व की 6 प्रमुख मुद्राओं की तुलना में डॉलर की मजबूती दर्शाने वाला डॉलर इंडेक्स दिन के कारोबार में 105.81 पर कारोबार कर रहा था। रुख करते हैं वैश्विक शेयर बाजारों का। सबसे पहले एशियाई शेयर बाजार। सिंगापुर के स्टेट्स टाइम्स को छोड़कर अधिकतर एशियाई शेयर बाजार आज लाभ के साथ बंद हुए। सिंगापुर के स्टेट्स टाइम्स में 0.2% की गिरावट रही। दक्षिण कोरिया के कोस्पी में आज 1.9% का उछाल आया और हांगकांग का हैंगसेंग 1.3% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुआ। जापान का निकेई 0.6% और चीन का शंघाई कंपोजिट इंडेक्स 0.1% की बढ़त के साथ बंद हुए। अंतर्दिवसीय कारोबार के दौरान यूरोपीय बाजार ऊपर चल रहे थे। लंदन का FTSE 100 0.2% और जर्मनी का डेक्स 0.1% की बढ़त के साथ कारोबार कर रहे थे। हालांकि फ्रांस का कैक 40 0.4% की गिरावट दिखा रहा था।
US stocks closed higher yesterday to notch their third straight day of gains. The three major US indices rose after dovish comments from US Federal Reserve officials pushed Treasury yields lower. Investors also remained cautious amid developments in West Asia. The Nasdaq Composite Index climbed 0.6%, the S&P 500 rose 0.5%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average added 0.4%. Avinashji, the conflict and the developments in West Asia, how are they likely to affect the US market?
No, I think US market is also looking at this very closely. I think the bigger variable will be obviously, crude oil prices. My sense is that, looking at the job data growth, the kind of corporate profit growth, again, US markets index-wise have risen quite sharply. So I think now it's going to be more stock-specific because even the US markets will be looking at the earnings season very closely. So my sense is that yes, in the very near term, the markets will remain volatile. Any kind of negative news flow from Israel is definitely going to have a significant impact on the US market. So I think we'll have to wait and watch. But I think definitely it looks very clear that the markets are going to have a seesaw movement, at least in the very near term in the US.
Right.
जी, अविनाश जी, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्रा कोष ने अभी हाल ही में जो भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था की विकास की जो गति है उसका अनुमान को बढ़ा करके अभी बताया है और 6.3% कर दिया है। उसके बरक्स अगर वैश्विक अर्थव्यवस्थाओं के अनुमान को उसने कम किया है और ख़ासतौर पर अगर हम चीन की बात करें तो एशिया की सबसे बड़ी अर्थव्यवस्था है। चीन के विकास दर अनुमान को 2023 के लिए 0.2% घटाकर 5% और 2024 के लिए घटाकर 4.2% कर दिया है। ये जो आपने अभी कहा इजराइल और ये जो अभी संघर्ष शुरू हुआ है, ये विश्व की जो अर्थव्यवस्थाएं हैं, क्या आपको लगता है कि एक मोमेंटम खो रही हैं भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था को छोड़कर हम बात करें तो?
नहीं, बिल्कुल। देखिए, इंडियन मार्केट एक रेसिलेंट मार्केट है और आज मैं बता दूं कि CLSA जो बहुत बड़ा FII है, उसने उसके पोर्टफोलियो में इंडिया का एलोकेशन एक्चुअली बढ़ा है। उनका कहना है कि इंडिया एक बहुत रेसिलेंट इकोनॉमी है जो आगे भी बहुत अच्छी तरह से ग्रोथ रिकॉर्ड करेगी। तो ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी के मुकाबले में हमको लग रहा है कि इंडिया वेरी वेल इंसुलेटेड है और ग्रोथ अच्छी होगी। तो इसका डेफिनेटली प्रभाव और फायदा इंडियन मार्केट्स को जरूर मिलेगा।
So when we talk of insulation of the Indian markets, what are some strengths that we need to continue to build on so that, we remain connected with the rest of the world, but yet, strong on our bases?
No, I think the biggest advantage for India is that, we have a very large domestic market. Indian companies are competitively positioned, and I think for a very long time FIIs were not confident on India, but I think despite the fact that some FII selling is happening, clearly the mood and the sentiment from FIIs in India is quite upbeat. So I think markets are entering a very volatile zone. Typically during election time and during general election times, we see the markets getting very volatile and remaining very up and down. But broadly, from a longer term basis, I think a lot of FDI investment, a lot lot of FI investment is expected. So I think, Indian investors need to understand that they need to take a longer term call on well-managed blue chip companies. I would believe in the next, say, 2 years, investments probably will give very good rewards, but I think they need to exercise a little bit of patience here.
So, and I hear you repeatedly saying that we need to take a longer term view. And yet we've had so many young people just jumping onto this bandwagon of saying, investing in stocks directly. It's like a fad, and it's also like a craze. And of course, there's a thrill to that. Do you think that somewhere these are small pockets and sometimes the loss could be big. So caution over there to say that it's exciting. So limit the money that you want to put in, but go longer term. Any advice?
Exactly. I think that is the right strategy. You should be a little cautious, but I think look at the longer term picture. I think direct investments are welcome, but I think even mutual fund route is also important. So probably, investors should take a long term view, because equity is an asset class which is definitely, something which is going to outperform, because, cutting down the inflationary impact, only equity will grow. And I think one last point which I would like to make is that in India, the equity penetration is extremely small. So there's a lot of headroom for growth, for people to put money in equity and, generate good wealth creation.
Right. We now move to oil prices. Oil prices edged lower today amid fears of disruption to supplies due to the conflict in West Asia. In intraday trade, Brent crude was trading at $87.35 per barrel. West Texas Intermediate crude price was at $85.70 per barrel when reports last came in. Avinashi, if this conflict is there, maybe for a staggered period for a few weeks or maybe a month or so, where do you see the oil prices heading?
No, I think it's very difficult to give you a target. I would believe that anything more than $100 a barrel is definitely not good, because once the crude oil price crosses $105 a barrel, I think it's going to be very volatile. So my sense is, in the very near term, I think we would be looking at levels of $100 to $105 a barrel. On the bottom, I think $75 to $80 barrel is definitely good.
जी. अब कीमती धातुओं की बात कर लेते हैं. मल्टी कमोडिटी एक्सचेंज में दिसंबर अनुबंध के लिए सोना 285 रुपए की तेजी से 57,920 रुपए प्रति 10 ग्राम पर चल रहा था. समाचार तैयार किए जाने तक दिसंबर अनुबंध वाली चांदी भी 635 रुपए की तेजी से 69,550 रुपए प्रति किलोग्राम के स्तर पर कारोबार कर रही थी. वैश्विक बाजारों में न्यूयॉर्क मर्केंटाइल एक्सचेंज में सोना तेजी के साथ $1,884 और 40 सेंट प्रति औंस पर कारोबार कर रहा था. चांदी भी बढ़त के साथ $22 और 20 सेंट प्रति औंस पर चल रही थी. अविनाश जी, सोने और चांदी की कीमतों की बात करें तो अब कुछ हमें तेजी, कुछ मोमेंटम दिखाई पड़ रहा है सोने चांदी की कीमतों में. हालांकि अभी भी डॉलर में मजबूती बनी हुई है, और जिस तरीके की ये जियोपॉलिटिकल सिचुएशन डेवलप हो रही है उसमें आने वाले 3-4 महीनों की अगर हम बात करें साल के आखिर तक, तो सोने की चाल आप कैसी देख रहे हैं?
देखिए, नियर टर्म में तो सोने का प्राइस है वो डिपेंड करेगा कि वॉर की सिचुएशन कैसे आगे बढ़ती है. अगर वॉर बढ़ती है तो सोने का भाव बढ़ने का चांस है, क्योंकि नॉर्मली हेजिंग एसेट होता है. तो नियर टर्म में तो लग रहा है कि इमीडिएटली तो कोई स्पाइक नहीं आएगा, लेकिन अगर महीना 2 महीना ये वॉर चली तो सोने में आपको एक अच्छी तेजी देखने को मिल सकती है.
So we are a young country, Avinashji, and this is a youth-related question. So young people are more excited by quick movements up and down, even if it's volatility, and investing. And you said we have headroom in equities. Would you advise young people also to invest in gold quickly, in brief?
Yeah, I think gold should be an asset class in every Indian's portfolio. But I think longer term, I think you must understand that the returns which one can make in equity are far lesser than in gold. So gold is an asset class only if you got a 5 to 6 year view. In the very short term, you wouldn't be able to make any money from gold. So gold should be a reasonably small portion in your portfolio, but definitely it should be there.
Right.
अविनाश गोरक्षकर जी, कार्यक्रम में शामिल होने और इतनी उपयोगी चर्चा के लिए आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you, Avinash ji, for joining us on the program. And now, listeners, before we close, a reminder of the headlines. Paving the way to auction blocks for lithium, niobium and rare earth elements, Union Cabinet approves royalty rates for mining. Key domestic share indices rise over 0.5%. Sensex ends near the 66,500 mark. Nifty closes above 19,800 level. And oil prices fall around 1% to hover near $87 per barrel. And that's it in this edition of Market Mantra. Namaskar.
Namaskar.